Please, I want to pass. Move now. See us everywhere just blocked today. We get the yellow bus money. Then we enter Queen.
Hello. To those still awake. Now, as the city has quieted down, as the rooms are dimly lit, just enough to keep one person warm, I want to tell you a long story. A story that needs no rush, no early climax. This story begins with a poor construction worker in Nigeria. A man born into hardship, raised on sweat, and who lived his whole life with something seemingly small, yet enough to change the fate of many others. If you are ready, let's begin. Samuel was born in a small village where the red earth clung to his skin from a young age. His father was a construction worker, and his mother was a street vendor. Samuel was used to going to bed early from exhaustion and waking up very early from hunger. By the age of 12, he knew how to mix mortar. At 15, he knew how to build a straight wall without a ruler. At 20, he left the village for Lagos, carrying a cloth bag and his father's advice: be poor, but don't let your heart be poor with you. Lagos was not a kind place. Samuel worked from morning till night. Some days he was paid, other days he was cheated. Sometimes he slept right at the construction site, using empty cement bags as bedding. The mud house he later lived in was something he built himself using leftover materials. Samuel wasn't rich, but he was used to it. That day, Samuel worked from early morning. The Lagos sun was scorching. His shirt was soaked with sweat. As the sun began to set, the construction site owner paid him and let him go. Samuel walked home, stopping to buy a loaf of bread and a bottle of water. That was his dinner. He didn't know that. In just a few minutes, his life would take a completely different turn. Near the bus station, Samuel saw a girl sitting against a wall. She was wearing a worn-out waitress uniform. She clutched her bag, her head bowed, her shoulders trembling. Samuel walked a few steps past and then stopped. He stood there for a few long seconds. Samuel spoke, his voice slow and hesitant. "Miss, do you need any help?" The girl looked up. Tears still welled in her eyes. I'm fine." Samuel knew that was the answer from someone who wasn't well at all. Samuel handed her a bottle of water. "Drink some. It's so hot." The girl took it, her hands trembling. After a moment, she said softly, "My name is Amina." Samuel nodded. "I'm Samuel." Amina explained that she worked as a waitress in a restaurant. That day, a customer broke an expensive bottle of wine. The manager made her pay for it. She had no money. She was fired that same day. "I don't have money for rent anymore." The landlord said, "I have to move out tonight." She paused for a moment, then continued, "I don't know where to go." Samuel was silent. He looked at the loaf of bread in his hand. Then he looked at the darkening sky. He remembered himself many years ago. He had stood there just like this. no money, no one to ask about him. Samuel broke the loaf of bread in half and gave one half to Amina. "Eat it." Amina looked up at him. "Why are you helping me?" Samuel thought for a moment and replied, "Because if no one helps you today, then tomorrow it might be my turn." It was dark. Samuel said, "If you don't have a place to sleep yet, my house isn't big, but it's safe." Amina hesitated. "Aren't you afraid of me?" Samuel shook his head. "I'm only afraid of leaving someone else out on the street." The house was small, with an old tin roof, but clean. Samuel spread a mat on the floor. "You sleep on the bed." One night, then 2 nights. Amina stayed to help Samuel cook and clean. In the evenings, they sat on the porch. Amina asked, "Aren't you curious about my past?" Samuel replied, "If you want to tell me, I'll listen. Otherwise, I won't." It was a night of power outage. Outside, the wind rustled the corrugated iron roof. Samuel sat silently, while Amina gazed into the darkness for a long time, as if her entire childhood was hidden there. Amina spoke, her voice low. "I wasn't born to be a servant." Samuel turned to her, not asking, just waiting. Amina recounted that her father had once been the chairman of a large corporation. His name was associated with the constructions, the roads, the buildings that had appeared in Nigerian newspapers. Her childhood had unfolded in spacious houses, in a feeling of security. Back then, I thought my parents would always be with me. Then her parents died. The accident was declared a traffic accident. The car lost control. No one survived. Amina was silent for a long time before finally saying, "But since then, I've always felt something was wrong." After the funeral, her relatives began to change. The paperwork was withheld. The power of decision was no longer hers. I have no evidence. Only intuition. And fear. Amina looked down at her hands. "I know everything has been taken from me, but I can't prove anything." Samuel whispered, "That's enough to hurt." Life didn't change much afterward. Samuel still woke up very early. While it was still dark, he would put on his coat and go to the construction site. By the time he returned home, it was usually already dark. His hands were cracked, his back ached, and he always smelled of mortar and dust. Amina wasn't much better. She did all sorts of odd jobs. She washed clothes for hire. She cooked for others. Sometimes she was so tired that she fell asleep as soon as she lay down. Their lives were a series of days spent going to work and coming home in the evening, counting every penny. There was never a month with plenty of money. Sometimes they even lacked it. But in that mud house, Amina no longer felt abandoned. In the evenings, they would sit by the small oil stove. Samuel would often say, very truthfully, "I'm poor. Maybe I'll be for the rest of my life." Amina would smile, "But I've never felt richer than I do now." Love came not with grand promises, but with patient staying. One evening, after a long day at work, Samuel placed a simple ring in front of Amina, made from a piece of metal he had saved from the construction site. He said, his voice hesitant, "I have nothing but this house in my hands. If you accept, I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Amina looked at the ring for a long time before nodding. "As long as you don't let go of my hand, That's enough. They got married simply, with neighbors as witnesses. A year later, then 2 years. They had a child together. The child grew up in the mud house, accustomed to the sound of rain falling on the tin roof and the soft laughter of his parents each evening. Seeing Samuel thin from hard work, seeing her child sleeping peacefully in the cramped house, Amina began to think more deeply. She understood that love alone wasn't enough to protect this family forever. And it was from that moment that Amina decided to revisit the past, to trace the accident from years ago. Not out of hatred, but because she wanted her child to have a future that wouldn't begin with the same hardship as his father. Amina had been silent for a long time, but living with Samuel, for the first time in years, she felt she had a place in the world. And when people are no longer afraid, they begin to dare to look back at the past. Amina contacted an old lawyer who had worked directly with her father. Initially, he refused. "I no longer have the evidence," he said, "and I'm not young enough to confront them anymore." But Amina didn't give up. She and the lawyer unearthed seemingly buried files, old contracts, unusual signatures, missing pages in accident reports. The fragmented details gradually pieced together. The truth emerged slowly but clearly. The accident from years ago wasn't entirely accidental. It had been orchestrated to eliminate her parents, paving the way for the seizure of power and property. Amina said, calmly, "I don't need them to pay the price with pain. I just want to get back what belongs to me." She signed the papers, submitted the application, gathered testimony. Every evening, when Samuel asked, Amina would simply say, "I'm finishing the path that I didn't dare to walk before." One evening, after their child had fallen asleep, Amina sat beside Samuel for a long time. She whispered, "I need to go to the city for a few days." Samuel looked up. "Is something wrong?" Amina shook her head. "Just some old business. I'll be back soon." Samuel looked into his wife's eyes. He didn't fully understand, but he believed her. "Be careful. The house is still here." Amina left the house the next morning, carrying a small bag and carefully wrapped old papers. Lagos greeted Amina with crowded streets and cold, imposing high-rise buildings. Her lawyer had prepared everything. In the courtroom, those who had once stood at the top now sat opposite her. They were elegantly dressed, their eyes confident, as if the truth still belonged to them. The trial lasted days. The lawyer presented each document, forged contracts, mismatched signatures, unusual money transfers. Then the accident file was reopened. One witness stood up, then a second. Details that had been overlooked now became clear. The car had been tampered with. The route had been altered. The timings didn't match. The courtroom fell silent. Amina stood up, her voice calm. "I have been silent for years. Not because I didn't know, but because I had no evidence. Today, I am only asking for what belongs to me." On the day of the sentencing, the courtroom was packed. Amina sat upright, her hands resting on her knees. For days, she had become accustomed to remaining calm. But at this moment, her heart pounded. The judge entered. Everyone in the room rose. The verdict was read slowly, sentence by sentence, as if to ensure no one had misheard. Ownership of the corporation was returned to Amina. The fraudulent contracts were declared invalid. The accident from years ago was confirmed to have been orchestrated. In that moment, Amina couldn't hold back any longer. Tears streamed down her face, not from pain, but from relief. Because finally, the truth had been revealed. She covered her mouth with her hand, her shoulders trembling slightly. A vivid image flashed through her mind. Samuel, in the old mud house, leaving early and returning late, his shirt stained with plaster, his back hunched over from exhaustion. His young child slept peacefully under the corrugated iron roof, unaware that his fate had just been changed. Amina whispered, as if talking to herself, "Finally, I can protect my family." She won the case, not just for herself, but for the husband who had believed in her during their poorest days, and for the child who had grown up in poverty without ever complaining. Amina returned late one afternoon. The car stopped at the beginning of the familiar dirt road. She got out, without calling ahead, without asking anyone to accompany her. From a distance, she saw Samuel. He was bending over the old fence, repairing a broken wooden post. His feet were muddy. His hands were covered in dirt. His shirt was faded from the sun. His hair was damp with sweat. Everything was exactly as it had been the day she left. In that moment, Amina's heart ached. She stood and watched for a long time, not out of hesitation, but out of sorrow. Samuel looked up when he heard her voice. Samuel looked up when he heard footsteps. He squinted towards the road. The slanted afternoon sunlight blurred everything slightly. It took him a few seconds to recognize the person standing there. Amina? He froze. The hammer in his hand fell to the ground with a dry clatter. Amina said nothing. She quickened her pace. Each step seemed to tread upon the long, drawn-out years that had passed. When she was a few steps away from him, she stopped. Samuel looked at her from head to toe, as awkward as if he were seeing a long-lost relative for the first time. You're back?" Amina nodded. Tears had already welled up in her eyes. Samuel raised his hand, hesitated, then lowered it again. He looked at his hands, still covered in mud. "Let me wash my hands first. I'm Seddon." Amina shook her head. She stepped forward and hugged him tightly. She held him tightly, as if afraid that if she let go, it would all be just a fleeting dream. Samuel stood still for a few seconds before wrapping his arms around his wife. His arms were rough and thin, yet strangely familiar. "Is something wrong?" he asked softly. "Are you tired?" Amina shook her head repeatedly, tears soaking his faded shirt. "I'm fine," she said, her voice breaking. "I just missed you so much." Samuel patted her back gently, not asking any more questions. He was never good at asking big questions. He was only good at staying. They stood like that for a long time, until the child inside called out, "Mommy." Amina released Samuel, wiped away her tears, and went back inside. She picked up her child and kissed its little hair. "Did you miss Mommy?" The child nodded. Samuel stood at the door, watching the mother and child. He felt something was different, but he couldn't name it. That evening, they sat together as usual. The meal was simple. The house was small. The wind still blew through the old tin roof. Samuel asked, very softly, "Is everything all right?" Amina set down her bowl and looked at her husband for a long time. In the weak yellow light, his face showed the familiar lines of weariness. She took his hand. "Samuel," she said slowly, "I've gotten everything back." "Aid." He froze. "You mean—" "I won the case," Amina said. "Everything that once belonged to my family is back. There must—" Samuel was silent. For a long time. He didn't cheer. He didn't jump up. He just bent down and took a deep breath. "So, I don't have to be afraid anymore." "Oh." Amina nodded, tears falling again. "But I could only do that," she said, "because you were here." "Is—" Samuel shook his head. "I did nothing. Dumb." Amina squeezed his hand tighter. "You gave me a place to stand. When I had nothing left." That night, Samuel lay awake for a long time. He looked up at the dark tin roof, listened to the insects outside, listened to the steady breathing of his wife and child beside him. He thought about the years gone by, the hungry mornings, the exhausting evenings, the times he wondered if he was living the right life. And he understood something very slowly. There are people who don't build tall houses, who don't leave their names on grand buildings, but they build for others a place to start anew. A few months later, Amina took Samuel and their child away from the mud house. Not to forget it, but to take it with them. Samuel was no longer a construction worker. He learned how to manage, how to read documents, how to stand in large rooms without bowing his head. But there was one thing he never changed. Every morning, he still woke up early. Whenever he saw someone crying by the roadside, he would stop and ask, "Ma'am, do you need any help?" Because he knew. Just one slow, timely question could change a person's life. And that is the story I want to tell you. At this hour, when the city is asleep. And that's where my story ends tonight. Some stories don't need grand climaxes. They just need to go slowly, deeply enough, and genuinely enough to touch a very peaceful place in the listener's heart. Samuel isn't a hero. Amina isn't a woman who triumphs in a flashy way. They are simply two people who once stood at the bottom of life and didn't turn their backs on each other. What kept me engaged with this story the longest wasn't the trial, nor the returned property, but the image of a poor, dirt-covered man willing to share his loaf of bread with a crying stranger. Perhaps, in each of our lives, There will be a time when we are Amina. And there will also be a time, if we are lucky enough and kind enough, when we are Samuel. If you're listening to this story late at night, when the room is filled only with the sound of breathing and dim light, I hope you remember just one small thing. Don't underestimate your own kindness. And don't think that days of poverty, days of weariness, days of bowing your head are meaningless. They might be silently saving someone, or saving you in the very distant future. Thank you for staying until this moment. If you enjoy slow, quiet storytelling, enough to listen to late at night, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, so that in future nights, we can meet again in stories that don't need to be spoken loudly, but are spoken very truthfully. And once again, goodbye and see you soon. Good night.